Everybody, welcome to week 1 of the Moon Diamond Sew Along in conjunction with Make Modern magazine. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Can't wait to get started and sewing along with you. Hope you've signed up for the sew along. If you haven't, there is a link in the caption below so that you can go and sign up and join us. It's not too late. Now, first week is going to be talking about your fabric selection, a little bit about foundation paper piecing and some of the supplies you might need, and generally just getting you prepared, ready for your sew along. Okay, so as you can see by my first version of this hanging up on the wall, it's still a quilt flimsy. I haven't quilted it yet. Waiting till we get to the quilting week. So as you can see, there are sort of 3 main sections in this pattern. There is this focal print diamond section, there's the little border around that focal print, and then this background. Now I've chosen to do a gradient of color behind these focal prints, and I was using Moon Garden from Chula Pink for this first version, hence the name of the pattern, Moon Diamond. And so I've picked some sort of coordinating solids to go behind. I'm going to show you what I've chosen to do for this next version that I'm making with you for the sew along. But basically, you need to think about those 3 sort of areas on the pattern and how you would like to have them look for you and for your fabric. This is a great one for doing some fussy cutting, and obviously Chula Pink fabric is fantastic for fussy cutting, especially some of her larger prints. So, this one is that beautiful bird. Even some of these smaller ones still has some lovely fussy cutting opportunities. So perhaps have a think about the things in your fabric stash that might go well for doing some fussy cutting. The other thing is to think about, well, do you want to do sort of a colour gradient across the rainbow, or do you want to perhaps do sort of a colour wash sticking to a particular colour? Maybe you want to do blues, really pale blues through to mid blues down to dark blues, and then perhaps find some fabrics in your stash for doing some fussy cutting in these bigger diamonds that perhaps enhance or go with those blue sort of colours. Whatever sort of floats your boat, really. So let's look at my selection of fabric for the sew along. Okay, so this is what I'm going to be using for my version, or this second version. And again, it's Chula Pink because, well, fussy cutting and the colours, I just love them. And I've also paired it then with 8 of the colours from, what's it called? Unicorn Poop, her designer solids with Free Spirit. And I've just toned them in with the 8 main focal prints from Everglow. So there's the blue elephants. There's the hippopotamus. That's so cute. What else have we got? Oh, the lions. That's right. The lions from Everglow. And that comes into colourway. So I've then transported into sort of more of the peachy kind of colours. Then I'm starting to get back into the pinks, and there was another hippopotamus in the pinks. And then we got to the pinky purple elephants. And then the purple giraffes. So that's what my sort of colour gradient is going to be. Sort of rainbow-ish. So it's going to go from these lovely pale blues through then to sort of the peachy light pink, and then into the sort of the darker purples. And I actually have stuck with this very similar print for my border, which is this Fairy Flakes print from Chula Pink. This one's actually the white background. I used the cream background in this one, but the white I think goes a bit nicer with my fresh sort of pastel colours. And because it's got all the different colours, in the birds and the little stars and things like that. It just sort of blends in quite well. I had thought about doing something more of a statement frame, but I think it starts to take away from specifically my colours anyway. If you're doing something with a bit more saturation and things like that, something like a charcoal grey sort of frame, or even a black or a stripe, though that could be a bit fussy to do when you're doing your foundation paper piecing, but certainly not impossible. So there are lots and lots of fun things. So now's the time to start going through your stash or your local quilt shop to find what fabrics are sort of speaking to you to make this pattern with. Now, the other sort of supplies, I suppose, from want of a better word, that you may think of having on hand for doing the foundation paper piecing is we need paper, obviously, because we're going to be printing out templates for this diamond block. So we're actually going to need quite a few pieces of paper because it is a 7 blocks across, 7 blocks down. So we're going to need almost 50 pieces of paper. Now, I normally use my standard recycled paper in my printer. The thinner the paper, the better. It's easier to get it out once you've finished sewing on it. But there is also things like this. Special foundation paper piecing paper that you can put into your printer. This one, obviously, is by Christy Lee. She's one of the owners of Make Modern magazine. Her design business is called Quiet Play, and she's put out this foundation paper piecing paper, and it is quite thin. It's still, easy to print on and all of that sort of stuff, but it is just that little bit thinner. So it means when you've done your sewing and you're taking your papers out, it's just that little bit easier. And it's also a little bit easier to see through as well, which can make things a bit easier to do when you're trying to make sure you've got your fabric covering the areas on your foundation paper piecing. So we're going to need some paper. And you're going to need a ruler. Now, I have used just a normal quilting ruler for quite some time, but I have discovered recently these rulers. Now, this one is actually at an eighth, but you can get them in at a quarter, which is what I would suggest for this one. But it's actually like an old school ruler in terms of it tapers down, and this makes it just a little bit easier for some of the folding that we want to do as well. I'll show you more about that next week, don't worry. So some sort of little ruler. If you just have a normal quilting ruler that has sort of that sort of straight side, that's fine too. That's still totally useful. What other things? Some good thread, obviously. We're going to be, when we're actually sewing our blocks, having our stitch length a little bit shorter because we're doing foundation paper piecing. Again, I'll explain a bit more about that next week. The other thing that I've included in the pattern are some little labels that you can use to label your fabrics so that you can keep track of, background color 1, background color 2, background color 3. Something that I had trouble with because once you take these 2 blues out of their order and look at them, they look pretty much the same. So helps, those little labels just help to keep things ordered whilst you're doing your cutting and making your quilt. Because we're going to be doing this over an 8-week period, it is a sort of a medium to longer sort of sew along for you, but we do have a lot of blocks to make and we're not going to be rushing through it. We've got plenty of time to make a few blocks each week to get our quilt top together. So it might be that having a little space in your sewing room or space that's just dedicated for this sew along. Maybe you've got a little tub. I keep mine in these little plastic tubs so that once I'm going on my quilt, I've got all my fabric, I've got the templates, I've got the pattern. If I'm using sort of any sort of specific ruler or something like that, I'll pop it in there as well. And I also pop in one of my little work in progress or project tracker sheets. If you haven't got one of those, there will be a link in this week's email that allows you to download one of those. Very handy because we know what things are like. Life happens, a crisis happens, and sewing is the last thing you need to be doing, and you're off doing something else. But when you come back to this project, you want to know where you were up to, and had you made some changes? Had you made some fantastic design that you wanted to follow? Things like that. So that project tracker sheet can really help with that as well. So that's week one. Go and make some fabric choices. Can't wait to see them. Tag me on Instagram, tag Make Modern Magazine. We love to see your progress. And if you've got any questions at all, pop them in the comments below and I'll answer them as soon as I can. See you next week.